Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me call together this meeting of the Public and Community Health Committee. We have a quorum. Thank you guys for coming. I know everybody is being pulled in different ways. And let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, Representative Stoner. Yeah. While you're going down, it's House Bill 440, and we're working off LC 491153. There we go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank those who were able to make it. I understand, as the chairman said, that everybody's getting pulled 10 different ways today on this false Monday called Tuesday. Very quickly, House Bill 440, as the chairman said, we're working off LC 491153. This has to do with the use of ready-to-use glucagon. For those who are not aware what that is, a shorthand way to talk about this is if you're a type 1 diabetic, this is kind of your EpiPen. So you use insulin to bring your glucose down. You use glucagon to stop your glucose from falling. Just a very basic explanation of what that is. So a situation we have currently in our public schools, K through 12, is the state has a diabetes management plan that's required. So every student, every child who is a type 1 diabetic has to have a plan that's worked with, obviously, the school and that student, their parents, and their physician. But, and every child's prescribed a glucagon pen, okay? And so if you have what's called a hypoglycemic episode, which is where your glucose is dropping like a rock, and particularly a severe one, you may go to the student, to the school nurse or whoever is certified in your school under the diabetes management plan to deal with these issues. And you may drink some orange juice or take some cookies or things like that to kind of stop your glucose from dropping, but it doesn't do any good. Your glucose continues to drop. At that point, hopefully the child has their glucagon pen with them. If they don't, you have a bit of a problem. And the problem is simply this. Let's say there's another student that does have a glucagon pen. It's also a type 1 diabetic. By law, that is prescribed medication for that one person. You cannot use it on someone else. And so what we've seen in some other states, and by the way, Illinois and Ohio have passed this, what we've seen in some other states is where some particularly school nurses have had to take the chance from a legal standpoint, so that's a legal jeopardy issue for them, of using someone else's glucagon pen on another child that it was not prescribed for. And so one, we're putting potentially school nurses in a legal jeopardy situation, or anyone else. But second of all, it's really about making sure that we have medication at school that a child, God forbid, for whatever reason, doesn't have their glucagon pen with them. You know, children do lose things. I think we all understand that. And this will authorize to allow schools, just like we've done with EpiPens, just like we've done with albuterol and Narconon, to allow local school systems to stock what you would call unregistered, meaning unprescribed glucagon pens, meaning they're not specifically prescribed to an individual, and that they can stock those. Now, again, this is not mandating the schools. This is just authorizing the schools to be able to do this. And also would authorize the pharmacies, because that's the other part of this, that has to be authorized to be able to provide this to the schools, that they're allowed legally to do this, just like we've done with EpiPens and again with albuterol and Narconon. So that's the fundamental part of this bill. Just so I've distributed to everyone letters from the Georgia Association of School Nurses, also which also I'll have a copy from the American Diabetes Association, also from the Georgia School Superintendents Association, and finally from GAE, also Page. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get a copy in here today, but Page is also supporting this. To give you an idea of the folks who obviously support us now taking this opportunity, kind of doing something that we probably should have done a while back. It's just no one's thought about it or dealt with it. And I'll stop there, be happy to answer any questions or anything.
Questions from the committee? Okay. Representative Sebo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Stoner, thank you for bringing this bill. This is, this will potentially save lives. I'm sure of that. I was surprised that this was not part of the school plan already. So, thank you for catching that and bringing that forward.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay. Hilton, sorry.
Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, I'll make a motion to do pass.
Okay, this is the appropriate time. So we have a motion from Representative Hilton to do pass, and we have a second.
Second.
Got a second. Any more discussion from the committee? All right, I don't see the discussion from the committee. We have one person that wants to speak to it. Suggs? Who's that? Huh? Suggs. Okay, Claire Suggs.
Paige didn't send a letter, but they sent me instead.
Great. How was the travel here, down to the Capitol and back?
Of course, this is a wonderful bill, and that is why my name is Claire Suggs, and I am here on behalf of PAGE, the Professional Association of Georgia Educators. And we want to ensure, and that includes, our membership does include school nurses. We want to ensure that school nurses have the resources to provide the necessary care to students, including glucogen, and are supportive of HB 440. We want to encourage lawmakers to consider providing funding to schools that would wish to acquire glucogen. We want to make sure that schools and nurses have the resources to provide the care that students need. But again, in lieu of a letter, you have me saying that PAGE is supportive of HB 440. Thank you.
Andy Lord.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Andy Lord. I represent the American Diabetes Association. I want to thank Representative Stoner for bringing this bill. American Diabetes Association does support this legislation, and as Representative Stoner indicated, there is a letter with a detailed explanation of why we support it in your packet.
Stoner, don't talk it to death.
Just a real quick comment on that is that hopefully we're able to get this passed this year, and that's the goal, is come next year, in between, is that we'll start talking about how do we help school systems and how do we, like we do with EpiPens, how to come up with funding, and not necessarily in the sense of the pharmaceutical industry to help out. So this doesn't just stop here. Hopefully once this bill is passed, we still have work to do.
Stoner, you've been here before. That kind of, looking forward and having money attached to it can get you into trouble.
That's why we're going to talk about this next time.
Yeah, but talking about it, you might not want to go there on other bills. Just teasing you, of course. Okay, we are ready. Is there any other discussion from the committee? No. Okay. Then everyone in favor of the passage of House Bill 440, say aye. Anyone opposed, no? And the ayes have it. Okay. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to go on to House Bill 41. Representative Lim, I know that you are a freshman, but I would suggest that you not ever send a chairman of a committee where you're supposed to hear a bill an email saying, in case I'm not there to present my bill, I'll have somebody do it for me. Because if you hadn't been here, this bill would not have been heard. And at this point, it's going to be a committee hearing only. So you have the floor.
Madam Chair, if I may clarify, I had another bill to present.
I think that probably you will see that the Health Committee overruled. What committee was that?
It was a second hearing for a bill that was very controversial.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, we'll see. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee. I am here to present HB 41. That's LC 339227. This bill is bipartisan and regards behavioral health. Specifically, it ensures that when a person is involuntarily committed for evaluation at an emergency receiving facility, that facility will always receive the original 1013 form signed by the appropriate health professional, or if existing, any legal affidavit, such as usually by family members or loved ones, attesting that they have reason in the past 48 hours to believe that the person requires treatment. To be clear, this already happens in many cases, but not always. So to take a bit of a step back, under current law, you may know when a person is involuntarily committed for evaluation by probate court order, that court can only issue that order if they have either the 1013 form or these affidavits, of which at least 2 are required. A copy of that court order does go with the peace officer taking the patient to the emergency receiving facility and becomes part of the patient's clinical record. However, under current law, it is not necessarily the case that all of the information on which the court order is based, that's the 1013 form or the affidavits, become part of the patient's clinical record for evaluation by the emergency receiving facility. That evaluation, of course, is as to whether that patient should be involuntarily treated, the 1014. This is important, as you can imagine, because these documents provide pretty important very recent clinical observations, i.e. the 1013 form, or important very recent contextualizing observations provided in the affidavits by loved ones. To that point, this bill was actually originally passed several years ago now, March 2020, unanimously out of House Judiciary, as carried by then Chairman, now Leader F. Stration, before it was unfortunately caught up, of course, with COVID. He'd asked that I continue to champion this bill on the basis of a constituent of his who provided affidavits attesting to her brother's imminent and pervasive drinking and suicidal thoughts. That brother later committed suicide after being committed to, but then released by the facility that never got those affidavits. She feels that information could have made a difference in the evaluation as to whether he was at risk. I'll conclude by saying, because within the 48-hour hold at the facility, the information attested to may or may not manifest itself. So without at all having to change what qualifies as imminent harm, subject of great debate, or increasing the hold time, the professionals who make the call as to whether the patient merits further involuntary treatment beyond the 48 hours should, I feel, at least have access to already existing relevant and court-validated information that, again, may critically supplement the clinical observations at the facility. And to be absolutely clear, it is only one piece of information to be weighed and considered, but it could matter. So to summarize, this bill addresses that problem, ensuring that existing 1013 forms and affidavits on which the court order is based for involuntary commitment will, via the peace officer taking the patient to the emergency receiving facility, become part of the clinical record for the facility's consideration.
Okay, I will tell you that I was partially in jest telling you about how I consider people who don't let me, tell me personally or say they're not coming to committee to present a bill. Partially in jest. I mean, it's a good thing to always ahead of time and not by email if there's going to be a problem. And you're saying this was Representative Stration's bill exactly like that? I will tell you that the reason I'm only going to do a hearing today and let you explain this bill is because we just had the big, mental health bill introduced today, got assigned to my committee, and I will have a chance to look and see if this bill anyway is included in the big one, and I see that Mary Margaret signed this, and certainly, but I want to see if it's in the big one. So if it's not, then, there's plenty of time to have another hearing and to get it moving. Okay, we have questions from the committee. Who's first? Representative Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mrs. Chair. Representative Lim, I'm sure you know that we have a problem finding bed space. And from somebody who signs 1013s and have signed 1013s, and it has taken longer than 48 hours to transport that person to whatever bed, I have had to drive across Georgia to renew the 1013 because it has to be, you can't fax it, you can't email it, it has to be in writing. So this makes me a little nervous that would extend my responsibility to make sure that the 1013 is not only current, but has to be in my handwriting and expires every 48 hours. When you call the peace officers, they will tell you they have up to 72 hours just to pick them up. So how, this to me is, in my situation, signing 1013s is not even realistic. If the peace officers are telling you, I have up to 72 hours to pick them up, and I'm going to take all 72 hours because they do not like transporting. So how are we going to get over that hump? Because when you add all of these things up, it equates to somebody not getting a bed when they need one. It's taking very long. We don't have a great way to transport them. And this just seems like another barrier to me when I read it.
Yes, I think we would all agree that that is a great problem. To be clear, it doesn't change any of the time, the 72-hour requirement, the 48 hours that I mentioned earlier. What this would simply do, and it's been vetted by the courts, is to require when they're already sending the court order over with the peace officer to the facility to include the affidavits and the 1013 form. And as I mentioned in my opening, that's already being done in some, if not most cases. It's not being done in all cases, to my understanding, not because it's an administrative burden. So it really wouldn't, because they're already required to do that and they already have those forms, the form or the affidavit, it would not require or add additional time, because I agree with you that the time is of the essence. I'm just saying that it would not add to the time that's already being taken to comply with the law.
I think that, well, it is an administrative burden for the clinician because the 1013 only lasts so often and it usually takes longer. They're in the ER longer than 48 hours. So it is an administrative burden, and this just seems like it backs up that administrative burden instead of addressing the problem and getting to people where they need to go when they need to go. So that's where I'm just.
Well, if I may respond.
Representative Lim, rather than argue
Yes.
with Representative Hutchinson, if this looks like it's going to move forward, I would suggest that you meet with her and see if there's some way to work it out. Representative Al.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Lim, isn't it true that this bill, which I believe we worked on together last year also, is an enhancement and refinement of the goals of HB 1013 with the past, and also emphasizes a goal that we heard earlier today in the press conference, stating the next steps in our mental health reform piece of having accurate and complete information gathering with respect to taking care of our patients?
I would certainly agree with that. I think my point is that because the information already exists, and not to say to Representative Hutchinson, I'm not saying that that is not an administrative burden to you all at all. If there's anything addition, it's to the courts. But the point being that because the information already exists and they're already required to keep a part of that, send a part of it to the emergency receiving facility, I would hope that the committee would agree again that that is important for the clinical evaluation at that facility. So yes, I would agree with that, certainly.
I don't think it's a question of whether it's important or not, because I agree that it's important. It's whether, because of dealing with transportation and all, and I saw somebody from the sheriff's group back here, I saw a lot of badges with, gold. Here he is, I knew, would have something to say about the transport at later, right?
Well, not today necessarily, unless you call me.
I'll be calling on you. Okay. So, that's the problem that Representative Hutchinson is bringing up, what really happens in reality out there. That's something they can work through it, maybe.
Absolutely. And then just one follow-up is, isn't it true, Representative Lim, that you are not a first year? And in fact, the reason that you have so many conflicts with your committee assignments is because he is the most prolific bill writer in our caucus, and therefore has many bills to present.
I think that makes it the case worse for me, actually. I should know better.
I apologize. I think this is your first bill that's come to health. But also, are you sure? Was he the most prolific writer? I had a freshman, she ran for Congress out in Gwinnett, can you pull up her name? Who came to me with 12 bills in her hand asking, who? Donna McLeod? I mean, have you carried more than 12 around?
Yes.
How many of that, wait. He writes them all himself?
Well, not this one, to be clear. It was,
and we consider them. Don't bring one to me that wasn't given to legislative council and written, that I know of.
Oh, of course. I try to do, I think we all try to do as much preparation as possible. I just,
Right.
as a lawyer, I'm able to do that a little bit more.
Okay, but of that 12, more than 12, how many did you get passed?
I got 2 out of the chamber last year.
Oh, so you're taking them, so you've asked legislative council, which is overworked, to, 10 bills. Somebody didn't teach your freshman class that maybe, especially being in the minority, that you need to, work or 1 or 2, maybe 3 at the most at a time, and you might be more successful. And of course, that pretty much goes for our members too, doesn't it? I think Representative Seabot probably knows that I've probably said something to him on that issue. And he didn't even write that many or has to have. So, okay.
Well, I think that time is of the essence, and I think nobody wants to waste our time. I'll just
Well,
say
we don't want to waste our time in legislative council and the money that it costs for them to draw up
Certainly
the
not.
bills either.
Certainly not.
Okay, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Actually have 2 questions, if I may. The first one on line 22, it said, as it relates to the affidavits by the 2 persons, are those 2 persons are to be related to the victim or the client? Or who can be those 2 persons?
That is not a legal requirement. That is pretty usually what, and I know Representative Hutchinson can attest to what usually happens, and certainly without getting into my details, that was the case, but it is not a legal requirement.
I have I'm addressing this from a personal standpoint, from a family member, and that's my reason for asking the question: who can sign those affidavits?
Yes, it is, as per the line says, anyone who, based on their observations, they have reason to believe that the person is mentally ill, requiring the involuntary treatment. Of course, that has to be considered by the judge. And the judge, the probate court, is the one that makes the determination as to whether, based on that evidence or based on the 1013, whether it is worthy. So it's not, even though others beyond loved ones can attest to it, it's still considered by the judge. But to be clear, yes, there is no legal requirement that it be anyone, specifically a family member.
Okay, my second question is: if that person has committed a crime and they're not involuntarily admitted, will that suggestion for treatment, mandatory treatment, go with them into incarceration?
It's going to always be part of the clinical record. I cannot say for 100% sure that will always go if they are incarcerated, but that will certainly be part of the clinical record that I know with every hope makes it to incarceration. But perhaps others can attest specifically to that part of the process.
Thank you.
Representative Howard, are you talking about, does it go with them to see whether they are put in jail or a court case moves forward?
No, actually, when they go into incarceration, into the jail, the local jail,
Once they've been found guilty, or just,
or once they've been committed involuntarily, if they're not involuntarily
Committed.
admitted and they've committed a crime, if they go into the jail, the local jail, will this idea of treatment follow them? There are a lot of, from my experience, there are some folk that are in jail with mental issues that have been arrested for a crime, should be there. But then that treatment is not mandatory. It's based on what the jail or what the local jail says, rather than, and if this bill could address that, I think it would be wonderful.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for the committee? None? Okay, it is hearing only, so at this time, any people from the audience that would like to speak to it? Hint, hint. Mr. Norris, if you would come.
We actually, Terry Norris, I'm Executive Director of the Georgia Sheriff's Association. I know many of you, and happy to be with you today. I feel like we'll be able to
have another conversation or two throughout the remaining of the session. So I did not plan to speak to the bill. We have certainly no problems with the bill in terms of the intent. We think it's important to pass along whatever information that may be available for the patient. We, the sheriff's offices, conduct many, many thousands of transports annually. We do the best we can. The 72 hours, you and I have talked about that before, that is in the law. A lot of times our people, we don't have anybody at the moment. Sometimes they do wait for the 72. But nonetheless, our transports are not diminishing. Our community-based services, while they are efficient in many ways, do not necessarily help us on the transport side. But to address this today, this is, for us, this is not a problem at all. We would like to see that information passed forward. As far as those other administrative concerns, we are not here to address those. So we would certainly support all the information we can have. As far as the representative's question about does this information follow someone to the jail, it could, but it doesn't necessarily have to. It just depends on the local people handling the case, both on the mental health side and at the jail side. I would say to you, I would propose to you 142 jails, 38,000 plus people in jails today. The level of service, health and mental health services in jails, is there's a broad range of how good those services are. Your larger jails are going to have generally better types of services for mentally ill patients or inmates. And they do get the treatment that they can give them at the time. We're working now with the Criminal Justice Council on surveying sheriff's offices in jails on intake, on mental health assessments at intake. It's a very difficult and complex situation for jails. Not all jails have the resources and the large, robust mental and medical care. So it is a decision at the jail, but it's almost exclusively dependent upon resources. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you. And could I make a suggestion, as you talk to your sheriffs around? Could they consider perhaps turning their health care, mental and physical health care, they're looking at using our federally qualified health clinics? I am amazed they're doing, at least they have been doing it in Savannah, and it has been working really, really well, and inmates have been getting much better care and, mental health medications and so forth. And, we do have about 200 and something locations across our state, and they are finding it very beneficial for the inmate and also financial. And the ones that do take it, take on the responsibility for that care. So I hope you'll help us spread the word about the federally qualified health.
We will learn more and do that, yes, ma'am.
Okay, because one of the reasons is that thanks to the federal very generous payment of school loans, like for medical students and psychiatrists and general practitioners and others, they seem often to be able to get those practitioners in areas where we can't get them because we don't have those kind of loan repaybacks and the commitment. So I would appreciate that. They are they are our safety net, and they go without people singing their praises and how well they work and utilizing them.
The mental health profession through our state are having very difficult times attracting folks. Like, we can't hire deputies and jailers. They can't hire counselors and clinicians and people that can really help. So, but thank you.
Well, I think the new bill does have in it where we're going to help pay back loans, not just new people getting out of school, but maybe some of our practitioners that still have student, loans that they're trying to pay off. So hopefully that will help. We're going to try to help. You haven't convinced somebody to move that over to sheriff's yet. We'll have to look at that for you.
Can we time out on that one?
Yeah, we'll have time out on that one. Bye.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Is anybody else from the audience would like to speak to this bill? Okay, Representative Lim, thank you very much for bringing the bill. Give us time for me to talk to Representative Oliver to see if any way this is covered in the bill or what they would like to do with this. And like I say, we do still have time to move the bill. Thank you for your presentation today. And with that, thank you to everybody on the committee for making an effort to get here so we have a quorum, and we are adjourned. Thank you.